Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, we're going to do a comparison of all the minor modes from the major scale. First off, if you'd like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 5.12 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson, we did a comparison of all the major modes, and now we're going to compare the minor modes. And again, it's really important to understand the different modes and the functions of them and the colors they create. And the easiest way to do that is to compare the major with the major and the minor with the minor, because like I've mentioned, in soloing situations, a lot of times you're going to have options between which ones to use, and you need to be able to recognize the sound or know what sound you're going to create with any of them. And this may just be a review for you if you've gone through all these lessons, but I just want to really make sure that you understand the differences because it's so important. So the major scale contains three minor modes. You have the second mode, which is Dorian, the third mode, which is Phrygian, and the sixth mode, which is Aeolian. And as you should remember from when we built chords, when you build a triad off the second note of the major scale, you get a minor triad. When you build a triad off the third note of the major scale, it's a minor triad. And when you build a triad off the sixth note of the major scale, it's a minor triad. So it's the exact same when you're talking about the modes. So if you get a minor chord starting on a certain note, you get a minor mode off that same note. So the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord are all minor triads or minor chords. So that means the second, the third, and the 6th modes are all minor modes. So the first mode we'll look at is the second mode. It's the first of the minor modes out of the major scale. It's the second mode, and that's the Dorian mode, and it's your brightest minor mode, and the intervals are root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. And of course those flats are compared to the major scale, because the major scale is just root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To get from the major scale to the Dorian mode, you flat the 3 and the 7. That gives you Dorian mode. And the Dorian mode's unique because of the major 6, so you get a brighter minor sound than all the other minor modes, and it's used a lot in jazz. It's a very common mode that's used in jazz or in blues or funk styles. So if you like those styles, really get used to it, but it's also an important mode just to know in diatonic harmony anyway, so you're going to have to get used to it anyway if you want to understand diatonic harmony. But if you like jazz, if you like blues, it's definitely a mode that will be really useful to you. So the next minor mode out of the major scales is the third mode, and that's the Phrygian mode. And the Phrygian mode, as you know, is a dark, more exotic sounding mode because it has a Spanish flamenco type of sound or a Middle Eastern type of sound. It's the most exotic of the minor modes from the major scale. And you can see that the difference between the Phrygian and the Dorian is that Phrygian has flat 2 and flat 6. The Dorian had a major second and a major 6. So Phrygian is a much darker minor mode than the Dorian mode. And then the last minor mode is Aeolian, and that's the 6th mode. So your minor modes are the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 6th modes. And Aeolian is darker than Dorian, but it's not as dark as Phrygian, and that's because even though it has a minor 6 like Phrygian, it has a major 2nd. So Phrygian had that minor 2nd, which is very dissonant, very dark. Aeolian has a major 2nd, so it's not as dark, but it is darker than Dorian because Dorian has a major 6. And I've mentioned before that the Aeolian mode is used a lot, so it's probably a sound that you'll like if you try it out. It's a very common sound. And again, just take a minor chord, or with the minor mode you can take a minor 7th, because all the minor modes can be played over a minor triad or a minor 7, and just play each of the modes over a static chord, a static harmony, and listen to the difference of all the minor modes together. That's really going to help get the sound of the modes in your head. So if you're playing in the key of G, you would take a G minor chord or a G minor 7 chord, play G Dorian over it, really listen to it, then play G Phrygian over it, really listen to it, and then play G Aeolian over it and really listen to it. And you'll be able to hear the difference between all the minor modes and how they're unique from each other and what makes them different. and then you'll be able to choose which one you like the most, because like I've mentioned, in certain playing situations you have an option of what mode to use, but we'll talk about that more in an upcoming lesson. Now we have this chart with all the minor modes together. Dorian is your second mode, Phrygian is your third mode, and Aeolian is your sixth mode. Dorian is root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. It's your brightest minor mode. It's a minor triad, minor 7 chord. No avoid notes, so you don't have to worry about avoid notes. Parent major scale is a flat 7. And the unique character is that it's a minor triad with that major 6. It's the only minor mode with that major 6 in the major scale. And it has a jazzy minor sound. You hear it a lot in jazz, blues, and funk. Phrygian, the third mode, is a very dark mode that has a flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. So compared to the Dorian mode, it has that flat 2 and that flat 6, so a lot darker, but still it's a minor triad, minor 7 chord, still just a root flat 3, 5, and then flat 7. Your void notes are your flat 2 and your flat 6, but they're also the unique character of the mode. So definitely play them and emphasize them, just you're not going to usually land on them and stay there. You're going to move off of them quickly usually, but it definitely creates the sound of the Phrygian mode. Parent major scale is a flat 6, and as you should remember, the Phrygian mode creates a dark Spanish, flamenco, Middle Eastern minor sound. And then Aeolian, the last minor mode, which is the sixth mode, is root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. So compared to the Phrygian mode, it just has this major second instead of a minor second. So it's not as dark as the Phrygian or as exotic sounding as the Phrygian. But it is darker than the Dorian because the Dorian has that major 6 and this has a minor 6th. But it's a very common mode. It's a relative minor. It's used all the time. So it's a pretty consonant sound when it's used and a pretty recognizable sound once you get used to it. And again, just like all the minor modes, it's a minor triad, minor 7 chord. The void note is a flat 6 though, because of the distance between it and the perfect fifth is a minor second, so it's a dissonant interval. Parent major scale is a flat 3, and the unique character is that natural second or major second with the flat 6. And with that flat 6, it creates a dark minor sound, but not as dark as Phrygian. And then we're going to look at Locrian really quick. Even though this is not a minor mode or a major mode, I just stuck it with the minors because it's closer to minor than it is major, because it has that flat 3 and major of course has a major third. But with the flat 5, it is not a minor chord, it's a diminished triad. So it's a unique mode, but I didn't want to create a whole lesson just on the diminished mode since I didn't have anything to compare it to like I did with the major modes and the minor modes. But the Locrian mode is your darkest mode, and like I said, it's the least common, least useful, but it is important to understand, and if you get into jazz, it's definitely important to understand. But for popular music, you'll almost never run across it, so don't get too hung up on it. But like I said, it's the hardest one to make it sound like it's the tonal center, to make this root sound like the tonal center, because it sounds like it wants to resolve up half a step to its parent major scale. The parent major scale is a flat second, and our ears are so used to the major scale that it's going to really pull our ears to want to hear this as our root, not this. So when you're playing it, play it over a minor 7 flat 5 chord to really help get that sound in your ears. If you just play it by yourself, it's going to sound like you're really going back to that major scale. And then if we look at this just by itself, it's the 7th mode. It's the final mode of the major scale. It's the only one that creates a diminished triad, the only one that creates a minor 7 flat 5. And all the notes are flatted except the root, of course, and the fourth. So the fourth is really the only one that's not flatted because the root is just the root. So when you're comparing this to the Ionian mode, you're flatting every single interval except the fourth. But the closest mode to it is the Phrygian mode, and the only difference between the Locrian mode and the Phrygian mode has a perfect fifth, Locrian mode has a diminished fifth or a flat 5. Void note is a flat 2, and that's because the distance between it and the root is a minor second away. And if you're playing over a diminished triad or a minor 7 flat 5, you're going to be playing over that root, and that's a very dissonant sound. But the whole scale is pretty dissonant, so you're just going to have to play it and really listen to how dissonant it is and how you can make it sound the best to your ears. Parent major scale is the flat second. The unique character, of course, is the flat 5. It's the only one with the flat 5, the only mode that creates the diminished triad or has that flat 5 in the 7th chord, and the color is a very dark half diminished sound or minor 7 flat 5 sound. So that's a comparison of the minor modes Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to show you how to get to pattern 1 of all the modes from pattern 1 of the major scale, the Ionian mode. And you'll just have to watch that lesson to see exactly what I'm talking about, but it's a very useful thing to be able to visualize on your fretboard and understand even deeper how these modes work. And be sure to download the e-guide. All the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.